3 months into my pregnancy, the United States was hit by an extraordinary snowstorm. My husband expressed concern about my sister-in-law being unable to care for herself and suggested she move in with us. I agreed without giving it much thought. However, on her first day here, she unexpectedly asked me to wash her underwear by hand. I refused and warned her that if she persisted, I would ask her to leave. That evening, my husband dragged me outside into the bitterly cold wind. After just 5 minutes, I started experiencing unbearable abdominal pain and pleaded with them to save my child. My once compassionate and gentle husband coldly watched me suffer and disdainfully remarked, "Alira, you need to know your place. Otherwise, next time won't be so simple." It became clear that he had always loved Leandra and saw me merely as a tool for his personal advancement. Now that he had access to more resources, he no longer felt the need to accommodate me, forgetting that everything he had was because of my support. I decided I wanted to see how he would manage without me. I called my mom and admitted, "Mom, I was wrong. I'm willing to divorce and take a job at the meteorological center. As for the resources there, they can stop as soon as I leave." My mom laughed on the other end of the line. She had always disapproved of me dedicating my life to a man, but I had never listened to her advice. At that moment, I realized it wasn't too late to change. Just then, the door swung open, and Fus stormed in, throwing Serena's underwear onto the bed. "Enough with the act," he snapped. "Go wash up, and we'll forget this happened." I ignored him. Seeing this, Fuss pulled the thin blanket off me, and the cold air rushed in. I couldn't help but shiver. "Allah, stop playing dead. It's just a miscarriage. It won't cost you your life," he said, each word cutting deeply into my heart. Serena weakly pushed open the door, and before I could say anything, she apologized. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have interfered in your relationship. I'll leave now." She lowered her head, holding her waist as she stepped into the bedroom. Her face streaked with tears. Thaddeus's expression softened when he saw her. He rushed forward to support her arm, his tone scolding yet full of concern. "Serena, you're pregnant. How can you be moving around like this?" His gentle words and caring actions triggered a wave of sensitivity in me. He understood that pregnant women need to rest. "Don't worry about her. Just relax. I'll make sure she stays with you," he reassured. I bit my lip, struggling to keep some dignity as I glared at the man I had loved for 6 years. "You must be dreaming. There's no way I'll let her serve you. This is my house, and you need to leave." Fus, clearly shocked by my public confrontation, stood frozen. Serena, startled by my outburst, glanced helplessly at Fus, and her emotions crumbled. "I'm sorry, I'll leave," she whispered before running out. Fus quickly regained his composure and followed her, glaring at me as he left. "Allah, I warn you. If anything happens to Serena or her child, you will suffer." I watched his determined figure retreat, feeling completely drained. I collapsed to the ground, tears streaming uncontrollably. I met Thaddeus in college, where he was the most popular guy in the biology department. He was charming, cool, and seemingly attractive, so it was no surprise that I was drawn to him. I pursued him for 3 years, and when we finally got together, I married him against my parents' wishes. Coming from a poor background, he had lost his parents at an early age and struggled in his career. I felt sorry for him and admired his talents. I even asked my parents to use their connections to help him get a job at the best firm in Chicago. Under his sweet words, I quit my own job and became his assistant. But everything changed with the snowstorm, when Fus suggested bringing his widowed sister-in-law to live with us. The following morning, the smell of food from the kitchen woke me. Fus was busy in the kitchen, and the table was filled with delicious dishes, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. The blizzard had hit, and the country had issued a red alert. I rushed forward, grabbed the phone, and hung it up. Thaddeus was momentarily stunned, then exploded. "What's wrong with you, Ayla? This is a special time. How can you abuse your power like this? What about the others?" I angrily confronted him, but Fuss shrugged. "So what?" he said nonchalantly. Before I could respond, Serena stepped in to mediate. "Fuss has always been spoiled. If you openly demand food like this, it'll embarrass her," she said, giving me a cautious glance. Don't blame Fuss. It's my baby who wants to eat. He's just concerned for both of us." I didn't want to hear it and shouted. "What are you carrying in your belly that makes you eat so much? 10 pounds of rice in one meal." This situation needed to end quickly, or it would affect everyone. "And you, Fuss? As a public official, how could you behave like this?" I snapped. "Enough. Don't pretend to be the good guy now. The household expenses rely on me. You'd better kneel and apologize, or I'll let you starve at home." I looked coldly at Fuss, who had completely lost his previous kindness. He now seemed like a different person. When he saw that I wasn't responding, he grabbed my hair and slammed me to the ground. His cold demeanor was something I had never seen before. "Bow your head and apologize. Only then will you eat," he demanded. Struggling to stand up, I forced myself to meet his gaze. "In your dreams?" His refusal to acknowledge my struggle only made it worse. Ignoring my pain, he locked me in the bedroom. "You can only come out to eat once you apologize." With the door firmly shut, I felt completely defeated. After the miscarriage, my body felt extremely frail, and today's ordeal made it even harder to endure. The bed was covered with only a thin blanket, barely enough to protect against the biting cold. I tried to stay awake, searching for warmer clothes. A pregnancy checkup slip caught my attention, and the small writing in the empty spaces was filled with Thaddeus's excitement for the new life and his joy at becoming a father. The signature from Seraphina made my heart race. No wonder Thaddeus was so anxious about the child growing in Seraphina's womb. And no wonder he was so distant when he saw me suffer. I frantically rummaged through the wardrobe, tearing through letters filled with their sweet emotions. I once thought I had experienced true love, but now I realized that all of it was just Thaddeus's lies disguised as affection. Heavy snow had fallen continuously for days, crippling all transportation. To survive and welcome the new life, I decided to momentarily humble myself. As soon as the door opened, the blinding light made it difficult to open my eyes. Thaddeus shoved me from behind, causing me to stumble and fall in front of Seraphina. I heard him impatiently urge me from behind. "Didn't you say you would apologize? Hurry up." As I looked at the couple before me, I felt an urge to tear them apart, but I still lowered my head and managed to say, "Serena, I'm sorry. I was wrong." Serena seemed to enjoy my submissiveness. Her face filled with triumph. After a while, she returned to her gentle persona and affectionately linked her arm with mine. "We're all family here. There's no such thing as serving or not serving," she said. shyly smiling as she handed me a pile of laundry. I'm pregnant and can't do housework, and Thaddeus, being a man, can't clean properly. So I'm counting on you. I looked at the dirty laundry in my hands, which had been there for an unknown amount of time, then glanced at Thaddeus, who appeared indifferent. Something that should have been forgotten suddenly tightened in my chest, and tears began to fall, surprising both of them. Serena, it's not that I don't want to, I said. My mom called me yesterday and told me I was born to bring misfortune to children. It's a ridiculous saying, but Serafina believes it, especially after I miscarried from being out in the snow for just 5 minutes last time. This made that saying seem even more believable. Serafina quickly snatched the clothes from my hands and stepped back as though afraid of being contaminated. Thaddeus's expression shifted drastically. He cautiously approached me, filled with hesitation and anxiety. Your mom called me. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. She didn't say anything, right? I looked at him warily, feeling both pity and sadness. It's okay. Mom said we should take good care of ourselves. Hearing this, Thaddeus let out a relieved sigh. With my mother's pressure, he had become much more reserved and even started to care for me during my confinement. Looking at Thaddeus, who had treated me so terribly just a few days ago, but was now being so compliant, I couldn't understand why I had ever liked him in the first place. Luckily, all of this was about to end. When the snowstorm finally stopped, Thaddeus invited a large group of friends over to show off his abilities. This is really nice. We only get steamed buns at home every day. Your life is so good, truly deserving of the reputation you've earned, one of them said. With Thaddeus around, we can have several nice meals every day. Flattered by the praise, Thaddeus responded, As long as you call me brother, I'll make sure you don't suffer. The living room was lively, and I looked at the flight information my mum had sent, feeling excited. Tomorrow, I would finally leave this deceitful man behind. Just then, the bedroom door slammed open, and Thaddeus swayed in, clearly having drunk too much. You're a woman. How can you make my wife serve you dinner while you hide in here enjoying yourself? He shouted. I coldly shook off his hand and turned to head back to the bedroom, but I overheard the men laughing behind me. She really is a rich girl, can't even serve a man. Does Thaddeus have to kneel and lick his wife's feet? Laughter followed. Serafina was half squatting, holding her belly while serving wine to the men, looking gentle and considerate. This kind of rough work should be left to me, Serafina said, pushing me toward the bedroom as if doing a good deed. Get down. Thaddeus's face turned red as he shoved Serafina aside. Under the influence of alcohol, he was completely unrestrained. I had once tried hard to please him in front of his friends, to save his face. But that group of people had been ungrateful and only made jokes that embarrassed me. After being insulted, I had broken up with Thaddeus. He had promised not to let me suffer again. But today, he not only invited those people back, but also made me kneel and serve them. Anger surged within me, and rationality vanished. I walked to the table and smashed the bottle directly onto Thaddeus's head. The pent-up frustration exploded at that moment, and the glass shattered. Thaddeus's eyes turned red. Alera, are you crazy? He yelled. Yes, I'm crazy, I shot back. How could I marry someone as shameless as you? Thaddeus didn't expect me to curse him in front of everyone. Furious, he hissed. If you keep making these unreasonable scenes, we'll get a divorce. The Hawthorne family doesn't support a princess like you. I lifted my head, slammed the divorce papers I had prepared into his face, and said, "Leave." Turning, I walked toward the stunned Serafina. "Trash belongs in the trash can. You two are a perfect match." The snow and wind outside had stopped, and under everyone's surprised gaze, I took off my wedding ring and walked out resolutely, dragging my suitcase behind me. As the door slammed shut, Thaddeus shouted something, but I couldn't hear him clearly. But it didn't matter. Once the plane took off, Thaddeus and I would no longer be connected. There was no dramatic love story between us. He didn't suddenly realize his mistakes and beg me to come back. And I didn't humbly seek reconciliation. When I arrived in New York, the weather was clear, with not a cloud in sight. My mum hugged me tightly when she saw me. It was still cold outside, but my heart felt as warm as spring sunshine as I lay down on my small bed. I truly believed I had left Thaddeus behind. Instinctively, I placed my hand on my chest and was surprised to find there was no pain, as I had expected, but instead a feeling of relief. I let out a breath. It had been so long since I had a proper rest. When I checked my phone, I saw that Serafina had practically taken over my social media. She posted, "A good woman will never make the man who loves her cry," with a photo of Thaddeus sleeping on her lap. Another post read, "A man's face is like heaven." Having such an amazing brother-in-law makes me feel so blessed, with a picture of him spending money again to treat his friends to a table full of chicken, duck, fish, and meat. I couldn't help but chuckle as I scrolled down, seeing nothing but people boasting about their wealth and comfortable lives, all with Thaddeus's face prominently featured. The man I had loved for 7 years. Looking back, it all seemed so foolish. Without hesitation, I deleted everything related to him. The cold front had returned stronger than before, with the national average temperature plummeting to -30 degrees, and supplies were in very short supply. I had been temporarily assigned to join a research team studying the abnormal weather. The hectic work helped me forget about my issues with Thaddeus and allowed me to focus on the front line. But things on his end were already spiraling out of control. Thaddeus stood in front of an empty fridge, cursing in frustration. Meanwhile, Serafina eagerly called her aunt to invite her and her family over for dinner. Thaddeus felt it was inappropriate to spoil the mood and politely declined. After Serafina hung up, he said, "We don't have much food at home, and the supplies haven't come in yet. Could you please wait a few days before hosting?" Serafina's mood shifted instantly. "I've already told them my current husband is a well-known big shot. Are you trying to embarrass me in front of them? I get it now. You're doing well and looking down on me. Fine, I'm leaving right now. I don't want to be an eyesore to you." Serafina was crying as she prepared to leave, her belly already quite large. Thaddeus, unable to bear seeing her upset, whispered an apology and managed to borrow some fish and meat. At the dining table, everyone was eating quickly. Thaddeus didn't like the situation, but forced himself to go along. His uncle, full of food, loudly burped and began criticizing Thaddeus. "Is this how you were raised? We're the elders visiting. There should be at least 10 dishes and a bowl of soup, not this." Thaddeus clenched his fists, smiling bitterly, as he lowered his head, avoiding Serafina's threatening gaze. His fourth uncle, feeling pleased with himself, glanced at Thaddeus and remarked, "A useless child raised without a father. Get up and pour me some wine." Thaddeus had always been hurt by his family, and hearing a man casually belittle his parents made him finally snap. He could no longer hold back. Suddenly, a loud crash rang out. Thaddeus felt a sharp pain at the back of his head, and blood began to drip down. He widened his stance, looking at Seraphina in disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but was struck by a wave of dizziness before losing consciousness. When Thaddeus regained consciousness, he had a severe headache, and the snow outside had intensified, blocking all roads, leaving him unable to get to the hospital. Seraphina could only apply a simple bandage. Thaddeus touched the bandage on his head, feeling intense anger, and instinctively asked for some water. But all he could hear in response were echoes. His heart clenched as he realized no one was there to help him. His discomfort forced him to get out of bed and search for something to eat. However, the rice flour and oil on the floor had all been used, and the water supply we had stored days ago was gone. Thaddeus could hardly believe his eyes. He searched the floor desperately, but there was nothing left. Seraphina hummed a tune as she opened the door, then immediately sat down on the sofa and began issuing orders. "My fourth uncle's family is coming over today. Hurry and have them bring the food. We must have king crab today. It's all your fault for embarrassing me yesterday. I had my uncle take everything from the house. Consider it some compensation." Her words made Thaddeus's mind explode. "Take it away? You know that's our supply for the next month." Seraphina was also angered by Thaddeus's outburst. "This has nothing to do with me. They're my family. Thaddeus, if you were really a man, you would find a way to get me food." Thaddeus looked at the woman who had once seemed like a perfect goddess, now acting like a shrew. His heart grew colder. "No, there's no food left," he said. "The office called yesterday and said they've stopped all additional supplies." Seraphina's face immediately soured as she broke down emotionally, repeatedly accusing Thaddeus of being a useless freeloader. Filled with resentment, Thaddeus lost all rationality and fought back, blood staining the floor. As he looked at the lifeless baby on the ground and the unconscious Seraphina, Thaddeus felt a wave of helplessness, unlike anything he had ever known. My figure solely appeared before him, and the memories of the times I had always put him first, never arguing or fighting, flooded his mind. Each time he had a problem, I was the one to help him. I gave him a home, but he had never truly understood. Thaddeus suddenly realized that the person he had always loved was me. Seraphina had only been an obsession. Once he made this realization, he kept calling my phone. "Alira, I understand now. Can we start over?" But the extreme cold continued unabated. No matter how hard we tried, we could not change the forces of nature. To ensure the safety of the people, the government began constructing refugee shelters to provide a safe place for the homeless to survive. I actively participated in the logistics efforts, and the number of refugees exceeded expectations. By the time we had settled one group, it was already night. I pushed myself to overcome my exhaustion and distributed drinking water and other essentials to them. A deep voice from the crowd suddenly interrupted, and I froze. It was Thaddeus. I handed him a cup of hot water, and he gave a slight, awkward smile. Now I finally had a chance to really look at the man in front of me. His once strong physique had grown frail, his hair disheveled, and a strange odor clung to him. He had always been so neat. Overcome by an unexpected sympathy, I allowed him to use the bathroom to shower. His pale, tired face looked defeated, as though it mirrored the boy I had once known. Thaddeus's voice snapped me back to the present. His eyes held emotions I couldn't grasp, leaving me with a sense of unease. So I decided to let him go. "I've done all I can for you. Now you can leave," I told him. "I came to find you because I want to make up," he said, disrupting my calm. His words left me somewhat irritated, but I kept my composure. "Thaddeus, do you think marriage is just a joke? I won't reconcile with you. Please leave." His tone became impatient. "I've already experienced life without you. You should feel proud." I was furious. "Stop making a scene," I snapped. He still believed the divorce was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and his selfishness was evident. Ignoring my disgusted expression, he reached for my hand. I yanked it away forcefully, stepping back, a sarcastic smile creeping onto my face. "Reconciliation, huh? Fine. If you and Serafina stand outside naked for a night, I'll agree." Thaddeus froze. "Serafina? She's done nothing wrong. You also said the child was your fault. It has nothing to do with us." He continued to defend Serafina, proving his so-called regret was just because he couldn't bear the fact that I, the easy target, had left him, taking away his ability to boast. Each word he spoke revealed his true motives. Realizing he wasn't reacting, I quickly called security to remove him from the assistance list and ban him from entering the compound. Thaddeus was dragged away, shouting and cursing, but I remained silent, coldly watching until he became a tiny dot in the distance. Turning around, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My face was streaked with tears. "Alera," I whispered. "Once you cry it out, it will be okay." In life, we must always look forward. This humiliation in front of everyone was worse than anything Thaddeus could ever do to me. I had once sworn he would never reappear in my life, but reality always defies ideals. Thaddeus returned to his low-rent apartment, trying to forget me completely. He was as obedient to Serafina as ever, even going as far as selling blood on the black market to meet her demands. He felt trapped, convinced he could never surpass me, patiently waiting for an opportunity to warn me. However, as time passed, he felt emptier inside. My image became clearer and clearer in his mind. He had once thought he deeply loved Serafina, but the more he saw her, the more he found her unappealing. Her cleanliness and constant neediness began to irritate him. Thaddeus didn't want to admit his own problems, stubbornly enduring each day, until he returned with the relief supplies and caught Serafina in bed with his boss. Furious, he confronted Serafina. "Haven't I treated you well? What do you really think of me?" The truth was about to come out, and Serafina no longer pretended. She looked at him with disdain. "You're just my little lapdog." Enraged, Thaddeus slapped Serafina hard. "You clearly said you would love only me for this lifetime. I never expected you to be this kind of person." Serafina refused to back down. "I might be shameless, but what do you have that deserves respect? A man who lives off women yet thinks he's superior. How ridiculous. If it weren't for Alera's wealth, I wouldn't even bother with you. And that fool Alera, asking for nothing, ended up causing her own child's death." Thaddeus had long avoided facing the truth, but Serafina bluntly stated it, causing him to snap. He angrily picked up a cup and hurled it at her head. That night, I was awakened by the noise from downstairs. I looked out and saw Thaddeus dragging the unconscious Serafina, shouting my name. "Wife, look, I've brought the culprit." Seeing me approach, he quickly waved his hand and tossed Serafina at my feet like an object. Her face was pale and bruised. I immediately called for help. "Wife, I've done everything you wanted. Forgive me, please." His voice was almost a plea, and it disgusted me. As I remained silent, his eyes grew more desperate. He clutched my hand tightly. "I've always loved you, wife." My obsession made me think I loved her. In truth, I've already given my heart to you. I know my actions with the child were impulsive. It was that woman who influenced me. Believe me, we'll have a baby in the future. Didn't you say I didn't understand romance? From now on, I'll never disappoint you. I'll do anything you want. I'll be submissive, trying to please you, forcing a smile like I did in the past. I stared coldly at him, my heart heavy with sadness. "Thaddeus, just go back. Don't make me hate you." The smile on Thaddeus's face vanished instantly. He had expected me to yell or even strike him, but he didn't anticipate my cold response. "Alera, after everything I've done, you still won't forgive me. I made a mistake that any man could make. I've changed. You said you would spend your life with me, never leaving or abandoning me. Have you forgotten all those vows?" He was still defending himself, and I couldn't believe I had loved such a shameless man for 7 years, almost falling out with my mother over him. "Thaddeus, you truly disappoint me." He took a step back, looking sorrowful. "Disappointment also means you care about me. I will make you love me again." I gazed at his wild expression, realizing he had deep issues. I chose to disregard him and turned back toward the base. The sharp, cold wind carried nothing but his desperate cries across the open space, reminding me of my past struggles. After enduring 3 months of relentless storms, hope finally arrived when the first drop of water landed on the roof. The crowd erupted in excitement, and the grey city came alive again. Due to my exceptional performance during the crisis, my superior had secured a chance for me to forge diplomatic ties abroad. If everything went smoothly and I returned, I could be promoted by 2 ranks. On the day I left for the flight, I saw Thaddeus again. "Is there no chance at all, Alera?" he asked. "I've been thinking about you lately. I know just saying sorry isn't enough, so I decided to experience your pain." Thaddeus shivered as he revealed a scar on his abdomen, a symbol of his sadness and regret. "I heard that the pain of a miscarriage is similar to childbirth, so I cut my own skin with a knife, just to feel a small part of your suffering." I recalled the day in the snow, begging in utter humiliation. "Thaddeus, please save my child," I cried. But he showed no sympathy. I felt no emotion, just the memory of his cold laugh that day. I walked through the boarding gate with my colleagues behind me, while Thaddeus sobbed in agony. "I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes. As long as you return, I'll be here," he called out. But I knew I could never look back. 3 years later, I came home, and an unexpected person was there to greet me. "Shall we sit together?" Serafina asked, smiling gently. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed. "Thank you," she added, apologizing in a way that left me puzzled. "If it weren't for you, I might have died that night," Serafina said. She had started a clothing business and was doing well. But every time she woke up in the middle of the night, guilt would overcome her. That's why she had come, to make peace with the past. At one time, I really hated those memories. But now they don't affect me, I told her. Before leaving, Serafina informed me about Thaddeus. He had passed away a year ago. After I left, Thaddeus had lost his way. Every day, he either drank or wandered through the places I used to go. Without my support, his boss made things difficult for him. Thaddeus, who had always thought highly of himself, refused to back down. And this led him to physically assault his boss in front of everyone, resulting in a prison sentence. When he was released, Thaddeus struggled to find work, facing numerous setbacks. Eventually, he had no choice but to take a job as a dishwasher, something he had once looked down on. One late night after work, Thaddeus encountered a thug chasing a pregnant woman. He had initially wanted to ignore it, but his body wouldn't let him. He rushed over to help. "Honey, this time I saved you and your baby," Thaddeus said, smiling as he closed his eyes for the last time. The image of Thaddeus on his gravestone was unchanged from before. I placed flowers on his resting place, feeling a swirl of complex emotions. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the turmoil within me. "Thaddeus, I wish you all the happiness in the next life. In this life, we were each other's years." Years later, our daughter called, telling us she was bringing a boy home to meet us. When I saw him, I felt a little dazed. The boy's name was Caspian. He was an artist, articulate and well-mannered. Both my husband and I were pleased with him. At the end of the meeting, I usually avoided taking photos, but this time I suggested we take a family portrait for the young man and his family. In the photo, the young man was bright and cheerful, his deep affection for my daughter visible in his eyes. I felt both proud and a little wistful. I placed the photo on my bedside table and named it Trish. After going through many cycles, perhaps what we seek in life is just around the corner. Only by cherishing the present can we truly find happiness.